Hello everyone, welcome to another video by me, Raphael, where today we're going to dive into another pretty cool article I found on Atlassian. If you all know Atlassian, if you're in tech, you probably know them from some pieces of software like Confluence, Jira, all that fun stuff. And I wanted to make this video because it's a topic that resonates a lot with me. So as we'll see when the video starts, or not the video, but the article read through, the name of the article, first of all, is called How to Make Work More Meaningful for Your Employees. And one thing I want to highlight real quick is a big part of this video, a big part of this channel is all about mindset and perspective shift in the workplace. I do think that anyone can learn how to find enjoyment and fulfillment from their 9 to 5 jobs. There's this whole thing that we hear nowadays about escaping the matrix and job hopping and finding something else because we always want more, more, and more. And I think it's really up to us to sort of control our destiny. I think one of the ways that I'm able to maintain my happiness and cultivate happiness, it's not something I was born with, it's something that I've had to practice, is about practicing gratitude. It's about finding ways to make my day to day more meaningful, right? And I think that over time, I've developed this skill that I can detach myself from my external environment and realize that really it's up to me to decide if I want to be happy or not. You can't rely on anyone externally, whether it be a job or someone or something, to make you happy. It really has to come from you. So I think in this article, I'm pretty excited because we will see how to make work more meaningful for your employees. And this is looks like it's taken from more of a managerial standpoint. It also resonates with me because becoming a manager is something I might want to do in the future. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So how to make work more meaningful for your employees. This is the work life section of the Atlassian website. I haven't heard of it even until today, so I'm pretty happy to get into it. This is by Genevieve Michaels, a contributing writer. So let's get right into it here. So if you were asked for examples of meaningful work, what comes to mind? Roles like paramedic, teacher, or humanitarian aid worker might be some common answers, but you don't need to be saving lives for work to be meaningful. In fact, nearly all work can hold meaning for the person doing it. I mean, this sounds literally like just exactly what I said, right? And I like the part about roles like paramedic, teacher, or humanitarian because one, I mean, my mom at some point wanted to be a teacher. I thought maybe I can be a teacher. I've taught in the past. I've done tutoring through platforms like Chegg, or I was even a web development tutor on this platform. It was a boot camp based out of Russia actually for their, I think it's like a search engine company called Yandex, and it was called Practicum by Yandex. I think now it's called Triple Ten, but I've always liked this idea of helping people, right? And especially, I look at the next piece here, the humanitarian aid work, and I think about my wife who sometimes struggles with finding the meaning at her work, right? She's a product manager, and although she really enjoys her job, sometimes it's hard to find that meaning. Sometimes she asks me, should I have gone into something like non-profit, maybe become a teacher, do something more meaningful? So I think this already, based on this opening paragraph here, is going to resonate with us a lot. I'm really sorry about my dog here. He's bringing in a very large toy. Let me take care of that. Oh, looks like he's maybe taking care of it himself. Okay, so getting more into this now. So, in Meaningful Work, How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee. Tamara Miles and Wes Adams explain how meaning has three crucial ingredients: community, or feeling connected to your colleagues and organization; contribution, or understanding the positive impact your work has on others; and challenge, or the feeling of growing personally and professionally through your work. In the book, Tamara and Wes share concrete strategies leaders can use to build meaning for their people. Over the last several years, we've worked to empirically validate specific leadership practices and organizational structures that increase meaning, Tamara explains. A lot of these things aren't very complicated. They're not necessarily easy, but they're simple, specific, and measurable, she continues. The thank you from a colleague, that leader who says they believe in you, the stories from a customer whose life you've made easier, all these moments add up to make work meaningful. So we're going to get into this next heading here. So it's up to leaders to create meaningful work. Now, before I even read this section, there's two things I want to highlight here. I do think that if you're a manager or maybe someone higher up in the chain, I do think it's somewhat, you're somewhat responsible for your team and how they feel. But at the same point, I still think you should be taking a little bit more autonomy in your work and how it is that you react to your external environment, right? I think that the ultimate form of controlling your destiny is very much about like controlling your environment, right? How can you make an environment in which you can prosper, in which you can find joy? Because what happens on the days that your leaders are not there? And this something that I like to think about is when you first start off in your job, you're like at the bottom, right? You're like a junior, you're very dependent on your manager. But the higher up you go, you're gonna probably become more detached from your manager. Even if you don't become a leader, you'll become a leader in something else. So imagine going like the individual contributor route or like the managerial route. Even if you don't go down the managerial path, you can still become very high up in the ladder in the individual contributor path, and you're gonna still have to learn how to make that, how to make work meaningful for yourself. You can't always rely on your manager because the manager is probably not going to really want to, be too micromanaging you when you're higher up. So all that to say is really try to learn how to find meaning in your job, and that could be through simple things like, keeping track of small accomplishments you've done throughout the week, right? Setting out small goals for yourself that you can look back on at the end of the week and say, oh man, I really did that. Or trying to foster new connections with people at work, especially with people that maybe you hadn't before. So all these little things add up over time to create that meaning in work that maybe you're struggling to find. So let's get deeper into the paragraph now. So the power of a meaningful work life is clear, not just in terms of happier people, but business ROI, return on investment. Meaning is the upstream strategy that leads to stronger engagement and productivity and retention, says Tamara. Meaningful work cites decades of research that back up this claim. When an employee finds their work meaningful, there's an estimated $10,000 annual productivity gain. They're 69% less likely to quit and 4.5 times more engaged. Most leaders want to make their workplaces meaningful, but it's not always clear how to get there. Most of us are immersed in busy, task-oriented work environments, so it's tricky for leaders to fit abstract concepts like create meaning onto their to-do list. Of note, leaders' actions or inaction account for about half of how meaningful people find their work. That's a big responsibility, but also an enormous opportunity. So let's think about this, right? Powerful, meaningful work in life is clear, not just in terms of happier people, but business ROI. This is very important here. When an employee finds their work meaningful, there's an estimated 10,000 annual productivity gain. They're 69% less likely to quit, 4.5 times more engaged. Think about anything that you've been truly engaged with in your life, okay? Whether it's work or personal life, maybe a hobby, something in your relationship, anything. Think about how much more time you devote to that thing, right? Because you actually enjoy doing it. Okay, just today, I always make an analogy towards working out, but just today I was talking to ChatGPT and I was talking to it and asking it, hey, you know, do I necessarily need to switch up my exercises all the time? If I'm like enjoying what I'm doing and I'm actually progressively overloading, do I really need to switch? And of course, there's definitely an argument to switch exercises so you're training more, different angles, different movements, but I feel like as long as I'm progressing and I enjoy the movements, that's what's going to keep me consistent. So I think it's very important here that when you like what you do, if you find your work meaningful, all these things are true. I think all these statistics are absolutely true. It's not always clear how to get there. So many of us are busy. So how is it that we can cultivate this meaningful work environment for not just our employees, but also ourselves? It's very abstract, like it says here, to create meaning onto their to-do list, especially when so many of us are busy throughout our day-to-day. So let's get to this next piece here. The meaningful work recipe, shared values and connection to impact. Two key components of creating meaning are values alignment and understanding impact. Today, we're sharing strategies and systems for creating both. When you and your employees share values, you'll feel more connected to your colleagues and more invested in what you're building together. Again, that doesn't mean you need to be saving lives. If you and your employer both value continuous improvement or strong workplace relationships, that's value alignment. And of course, work is much more fulfilling and meaningful when you can see how you're making a positive impact. That includes impact on customers, but also your teammates or even your industry. So I think when you and your employees share values, you'll feel more connected to your colleagues and more invested in what you're building together. I think a very easy way to sort of make it easier for all of us to understand is think about a relationship. A lot of times we hear that in a relationship, it's very important to have value alignment. You and your partner want to make sure that you believe in the same things, so you're moving forward in the same direction. Imagine that you and your boss or you and your team are moving forward in the same direction. You're interested in the same mission. You're bringing value to the team. Both of you are aligned. Imagine how much easier that will make working on this team, right? Because now, it's not so hard to find agreement, right? I think if work is difficult, not in the sense like the work is actually difficult, but if work is difficult that every day you go in and you're like, oh man, I really want to do this thing, but people on your team are constantly pushing back and they don't like what you're doing. And over time, that's going to lead you to burn out and you're probably not going to feel very great. So this second part here says, of course, work is much more fulfilling and meaningful when you can see how you're making a positive impact. I mean, think about Think about if you're working on something very in the background, very internal, and no one ever gives you recognition for it. You never see your work get demoed anywhere. You never see anyone appreciate what you're doing. But imagine now if you're working on something that's a lot more visible. And I think it really is up to you to put yourself out there. I mean, I just made a video about demoing your work. Demoing your work is a great way to showcase what you're doing and get that, fulfilling and positive impact. Even if it's something that's in the background, if you demo it and people appreciate it, that could be an easy way to turn something that might otherwise be hidden into something that you can show. And these are just one of the tactics I use to make myself just happier at work, right? These are the little opportunities you have to find. And I think that's very important, just finding opportunity consistently and constantly. Okay, so ways to build meaning by communicating shared values and positive impact. Most of these strategies come down to transparency and communication. Tamara and Wes recommend storytelling as a tool to make all those communications more powerful. Part of your job as a leader is to connect the dots for people, to tell the story of how the decisions you're making reflect your values and how you're impacting customers and employees, says Wes. Center values during recruitment and onboarding. Recruitment and onboarding are a crucial opportunity to set hires up for a meaningful career experience. These early moments have a huge impact on how meaningful we find work for the entire time we're with a company, says Tomorrow. Ask about how candidates' values during the recruiting process and be ready for a two-way conversation about how they align with your own. When sharing about your company's values, just don't speak as abstractly. Give specific examples of what they look like in action. It's great to say we value transparency, says Tamara, but it's better to have the CEO come in during onboarding and talk about a time things weren't going well. She made a difficult decision and she decided to publicly share her process with the entire company. I do think transparency in onboarding is incredibly, incredibly important. I'll be completely honest with you. When I started at my current job, our onboarding process was frankly terrible. We didn't really have one. And although I attribute a lot of my success to actually not having one, I feel like having been thrown into the fire attributed a lot to how I feel today. It was very stressful in the beginning, but it's kind of one of those things that you either survive or don't. And fortunately, I survived. And the pro of that is you are forced to learn very rapidly, and there really is no other option. But at the same time, I do feel like a clear onboarding path, a 30, 60, 90-day plan. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, especially in bigger tech companies like out in the West Coast. A 30, 60, 90-day plan like this could really be beneficial. So I think if you're a manager, if that's something that you feel like new hires are struggling with, this is probably something that you can implement. Make it very clear what you expect and have a very clear roadmap on what they should be doing. For example, in software, if there's like specific tasks they can be working on, just make it easier for them to pick out these tasks and see improvements quickly. I think in the beginning, it's important to get small milestones that sort of build you up, right? A long time ago, I had an idea for trying to see if I can maybe gamify this, like coming up with a handbook on my team that I would give to all new hires, and they would see like, oh, I checked this off, that's 10 points. I checked this off, that's 20 points, 30 points, so on and so forth. And maybe having like a raffle or like a prize box where you can get things depending on how many of these little tasks you completed. So I think that's very important with onboarding, and it's, especially transparency. I love this example here of the CEO actually coming in, right? I think a lot of times we hear CEOs and executives making decisions, but we never really see them. We don't know how it impacts them. We might just see an email, but it's like, come out of your shell and talk to us. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. I mean, the CEO is doing maybe something a little different than what we're doing, but we're all in this together. All right. So, get yourself out there and really make it transparent as to what it is you're doing. Okay, reflect organizational values and metrics and KPIs. If an organization is trying to be values driven, it's important to reward behaviors that reinforce those values, Tamara shares. While this may seem obvious, it's common for success metrics to conflict with company values in surprising ways. For example, if recruiters are rewarded for how many roles they fill, they may end up placing people in positions they won't truly bring out their best work. In meaningful work, Tamara and Wes explain how at accounting firm KPMG, these teams are rewarded not just for quantity, but quality of each placement and how happy the new hire is in their role. At Schneider Electric, values alignment is part of the review and bonus structure. Employees and managers discuss values in their yearly performance reviews, and employees who live their values will be recognized and rewarded. So I think this is actually very cool, right? Not just about quality, but the quantity. Not just the quantity, but the quality of the hire. For some reason, I think about like police officers and how sometimes they just stop people if they're speeding for like a quota at the end of the month. And maybe they're not even speeding by that much, but they need to fill that number, right? So imagine being a recruiter just hiring people left and right just to fill a number, and these people don't even like their jobs. That's probably going to bring down team morale. People are just not going to be happy overall, and that's just going to bleed into the rest of the team. But if you put people in positions where they belong and positions where they're happier, I think it'll just be better overall for everyone. So very interesting, reflect organizational values and metrics and KPIs. That's very interesting. Bring customer impact stories into regular communications. Every product or service serves other people, but it's not always easy for employees to picture the humans their work is affecting. That's why, to create meaning, leaders should weave customer voices and stories into employee communications. Record video of customers talking about how our organization has made life easier. Invite customers to speak at town hall meetings or company offsites. Include customer story quotes or video clips in employee newsletters. Build customer impact into performance reviews and reward employees for creating it. But it's not enough to share case study style success metrics. The goal is to humanize customers and share impact on their personal and professional lives. Instead of saying that a customer saves 6 hours a week, say they're less distracted and have more time for the deep focused work they love every day. This is very interesting, and I know I use that word a lot, but truly it is. A long time ago on our team, we realized that while we were doing so much work, no one really understood how it impacted the business. And I think in one of my earlier videos, actually, I know, not I think, it was in the promotion framework, I talked about learning and understanding the business so that you can better align yourself with what it is you're working on, which in turn should make your work more meaningful. But during this time, our team reached out to the managers and said, hey, we would love to know more about what the customers are responding to, good or bad. And it was very cool because the VP at that time started sending out these weekly emails of customer feedback, good and bad, related to all the different features that we're working on. So now we felt like, wow, this is not just a feature or a body of work that I deliver. It's something that a customer is actually using. And again, whether the feedback is good or bad, at least I know that someone's actually with their hands on this feature, right? And you can imagine in other industries, it might be the same. I remember a long time ago, I used to work in Disney World, and one of the reasons people at Disney love their job, it's because the rides they're working on were rides that real people got to ride. And going to the parks, they would see the people walk out of these rides with smiles on their faces. So imagine just that value alignment and seeing it's like a customer impact story in the making. You're seeing the customer get on the attraction, come off with a smile on their face, and it just all kind of melds together and feels good. So I think, again, if you're a manager reading this and you don't feel like you're allowing for your team to understand the business and customer success stories, customer failure stories, try to bring these things more into the light, and I think it will help. Structure thanks and positive feedback with if it wasn't for you. Sharing the impact people have on colleagues, not just end users, is crucial for creating a meaningful work experience. Many leaders completely underutilize positive feedback, says Tamara. This is a tool that is free, is not time consuming, and makes a huge difference. Meaningful Work cites a study from Gallup and WorkHuman, which found that less than 40% of people feel recognized and appreciated enough for what they do in the workplace. Yet hearing thank you just once a week from a manager has been shown to cut disengagement in half. Tamara and West recommend a tactic from fellow researcher Zach Mercurio, using if it wasn't for you messaging to keep your thank yous personal, meaningful, and focused on impact. Thank you so much for helping me prepare for the interview. If it wasn't for you, I would have forgotten to ask whether the candidate wanted to grow into managerial roles. Thank you for agreeing to let me pass the story off to you on Friday. I would have missed my friend's dinner party if you didn't come through for me. Thank you for pointing out that the development cycle was unrealistic. You've saved everyone on the team a lot of stress and burnout. Make sharing appreciation a regular part of how you work. For example, you could set a reminder to send 5 if it wasn't for you notes to your team every Friday. Early on in my career, we used to have a Slack bot that would every Friday have this thing called like high five, where people could respond on a thread and give shout outs to the people that they worked with for that week. Again, if this is not something you're already doing, I'd highly recommend doing it. Now, the key point here, I think, is making sure that these thank yous are genuine. People are very smart and they can see through the lies or the sort of trying to kiss ass, frankly, to someone just because. Make sure they're genuine, make sure they're efficient, make sure they're effective, make sure they're said as soon as someone does the right thing, right? Someone just finished wrapping up a great project, say thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, XYZ. I really love this framework of if it wasn't for you. It just helps frame the entire sentence into something more meaningful. This is a word that we're using a lot today in this video. But again, just say thank you to someone. It's humans tend to have a negativity bias. We tend to point out the things that are bad and never the things that are good. And sometimes all it takes is a simple thank you, a simple act of kindness just for us to completely change how we act, completely change how we feel, and just better perform. Think about, especially if you're in a relationship, how many times someone have said something nice to you, just as thank you for doing the dishes, thank you for taking the trash out. These little things are what help keep relationships strong and over time just last. So very, very important here. Really love this spot. Use spotlighting to show how values inform your decision making. Wes and Tamara recommend spotlighting situation, priorities, outcomes, talkback as a model for communicating decisions. This is a storytelling technique that can help leaders explain how choices they've made ladder up to values and organizational goals. Situation, what's the context? What factors did you consider in your decision? Priorities, what values were you focused on when making this decision? How did you weigh values against each other if they were at odds? Outcomes, how would the decision affect the company and team? How does that connect to larger organizational goals you'll have a year or a month from now? Talkback, create space for people to ask questions and share disagreements so that you can bring people into alignment around the choice that was made. Tomorrow and Wes recommend Loom as an asynchronous storytelling tool. I'll skip this because this is just like a tip here that we can read. I want to try and stick more to the main story, but use spotlighting to show how values inform your decision making. So what's the context? This reminds me a lot about this like interview technique called STAR, which I think it's like situation, task, action, and response, something like this, but a way to frame the way that your actions had a positive impact on the team. And it seems very much like here, like using this framework, you can sort of talk about how you made decisions. So a lot of times, I always heard like being a parent, for example, I'm not a parent yet, but it's not so much to tell your kids like, I want you to do this because of this, or we're going to do this because I said so. I've always heard that talking to your kids like adults and maybe using a framework like this where you go line by line, give them a very good reasoning, like maybe, I decided to do this or we decided to do this because your dad and I sat down and we believe it's going to be best for you because XYZ. So you can imagine as a manager or as an employee, if you were to hear feedback in this way, and someone's giving you this very clear cut way of how they came across a decision, it's going to be a lot easier for you to discuss something. Imagine you are given an opportunity and a space to talk about these things in your team. Again, there's some people that don't have this. They're just told by their managers, very micromanaging, very dictator style. You have to do this because I said so. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to get into these meetings and talk freely about how they feel about things. So I do think that if you are to present this framework to your team and talk about it in this way, it will make for a more meaningful workplace. Create dedicated online spaces for meaning. In distributed organization, it takes even more intentionality to create meaningful work experiences. One of the biggest mistakes leaders make is assuming people know what's going on, especially when they're not in the same room. Tamara and Wes recommend finding dedicated virtual spaces for showing appreciation and sharing value and impact stories. In practice, this could look like 1. A shared values board where employees can add stories about how they've lived company values or seen them come to life at work. An extra column on your Trello board for sharing a project's impact after it's completed. Tagging tasks in Jira with company goals and values they support. A Slack channel for sharing thanks and if it wasn't for you statements. As you choose how to highlight values, impact, and appreciation online, make sure you're being intentional and not creating extra work. If there are too many tools to contend with or you're saying thanks but there's no deeper impact shared, it just becomes noise, says Wes. It takes a lot of time, connection, and intentionality to make sure people understand what's driving the organization and the impact their worth is having. Right? So creating dedicated online spaces for meaning, I think this is really important. Remember during COVID, like some of us, I remember we used to have all these online meetings and Zoom calls. And what my team did is every Friday we started doing these happy hours, right? And it was just a way for us all to connect, talk about what we did over the week and maybe what we're going to do on the weekend. But now post COVID, I think it's still just as important to do this. In my team, we currently have staff meetings, which is just a way typically to talk about higher level things, but also just again to get a pulse on the team. It's typically done on Thursdays just before the week ends. But again, little things like this go so far. I think we tend to forget how important the little things are. It's never about the grand gestures, right? It's never about these big acts of, oh my God, we're going to do this, this, and this. It's going to be amazing. It's just the little things, right? Say thank you. Give someone a space to talk about something freely, right? Make it so that people understand what it is they're working on. Give them a very clear decision or a clear guidance on why a decision was made. I think over time, these little things compound and they make your work a lot more meaningful. And again, these practices and the way that you frame your mind are what's going to allow you to go to your 9 to 5, feel very happy, and be able to leverage that 9 to 5 to live the life you live. You do not need to escape the matrix. You can just be where you are. You can stay comfortable. I know that sounds crazy. You can still be comfortable and climb the ladder and live the life that you live. I'm living proof of that. I've been doing that for 8 years. While all my friends that I know, and it's amazing that they've done so because that's the life that they chose and I fully support them. Most of my friends have left and I'm one of the only ones that is still here after 8 years. So let that speak to how I feel about this and the experience that I've lived. So with all that being said, very happy that we were able to record this today. And yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you all next time. Later.